Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Asha Kothari Chaudhary and I'm a professor in English at Guwahati University. We are doing a course in Indian writing in English, and the module that I am bringing to you now is an introduction to life writing in India, its various forms and its development. Life writing is a written narrative account, primarily concerned with telling the truth related to the lives of people in historical, political, or cultural contexts. In India, life writing has undergone a lot of change across the centuries. And for several reasons that scholars in India, we find, did not give too much impetus to life writing or life history or biography, unlike other regions of the world. The reason behind this could perhaps be traced as being both religious as well as social. Now, although there had been a considerable body of literature produced, life writing could only be found in a biographical form in the earlier times. Thus, what we understand as biographical writing began from the time of the Vedas, which is about the 8th century BC, while the history of autobiographical writing in Indian literature is merely around, say, 100 years old. The Jataka tales, for example, that narrate the life of the Buddha is considered to be the earliest biographical prose narrative. Autobiographical life writing gains recognition in India in the 19th century with the development of women's studies and Oriental studies. The earliest found records of autobiographical writing in Indian literary tradition dates back to the period of, say, around the 5th century BCE. The Buddhist nuns at that time began to write about their life experiences in poetic form, and this is referred to very often as the Therigathas, but only some of these were really autobiographical in the true sense of the term. In this context, it becomes extremely imperative to mention that the women were the first people to write about their lives, and they were also regarded as the earliest women who began to inscribe the reality of their existence as women in a patriarchal society. It was after the Mughal conquest in the medieval period that writing about lives began to actually flourish. Autobiographies of the Mughals, such as the Babar-nama or the Akbar-nama or the Humayun-nama, comprise the significant events of their lives and of their political careers. Harsha Charitra by Bana Bhatta is the oldest surviving biography in India. In the Mughal period, historians were appointed in courts to record the lives and times of their emperors. What we find, what we refer usually to as biographical sketches of the great leaders of India only began to appear in collections in the 20th century. The lives and speeches of these leaders were incorporated into these sketches. A few examples of such collections include India's Nation Builders that came in 1919 by Debendranath Banerjee, or the Alva Joachim 1943 volume entitled Men and Supermen of Hindustan. Then later we have the Dictionary of National Biography, edited by S.P. Sen and published by the Institute of Historical Studies of Calcutta, that has been a very important compilation of 4 volumes, and this is being updated in the current time. Numerous biographies have been written by nationalist leaders, such as my master Gokhale, which came in 1946, by V.S. Srinivas Shastri, The Great Indian Way, The Life of Mahatma Gandhi in 1998 by Raja Rao, Jawaharlal Nehru, which comes in 1975 by S. Gopal, and the notorious biography of B.R. Ambedkar, which was called Worshipping False Gods in 1997 written by Arun Shourie. Documenting the lives of saints, of philosophers and thinkers has always been a preoccupation with the biographers working in India. Autobiography developed as a distinctive genre in India in the 19th century, a growth that evolved breaking away from the prevalent conventions. Prior to that, from the mid-18th century to mid-19th century, the literature produced in India, specifically poetry, displayed individualism and a celebration of self. It, in fact, was the impact of colonialism that the literary people began to attach value to individualism. A considerable amount of autobiographical writing in India is seen to be written in the second half of the 19th century and the early 20th centuries, particularly in Gujarati or Marathi or Bengali and other Indian languages. It needs to be mentioned here that two different types of writings which could document the progressive and personal view of the writers, and these are Govardhan Ram Madhav Ram Tripathi's scrapbooks that came in between 1957 and 59, and Rasurundari Devi's Amar Jibon. These are the books that mark the attainment of maturity in terms of what we know as autobiography writing in India. Being a graduate of the modern English education system, Govardhan Ram possibly wrote his scrapbooks in English, as it seems that he was preoccupied from within by the colonial surroundings. On the other hand, there is Rajsundari Devi, a self-taught woman who never had any access to education. And though she was not a renowned personality, and despite of the fact that she did not write her autobiography self-consciously, she becomes the first woman in India to write an autobiography in modern times, not being influenced by the Western mode, but by following the traditional Bhakti saint poets. However, the early 20th century literature in India exhibited a very interesting spirit of nationalism. It was a phase when prose forms gained more social significance, and the autobiography of Mahatma Gandhi, The Story of My Experiments with Truth, is perhaps the most dazzling specimen of life writing in this period. It was initially written in Gujarati as Satyana Prayogo Athva Atmakatha, which came in 1927. It is exceptional simply for the reason that it encompasses a lot of issues. It is expressed in a very lucid language, and there seems to be an absolute kind of genuineness, also highlighting the kind of spiritual quest that we normally associate with Mahatma Gandhi. In Bengal, Rabindranath Tagore's Apon Kotha and Porimal Goswami's Smriti Charan in the vernacular Bengali are noteworthy. Among the Hindi autobiographies, the most prominent are poet Harivansh Rai Bachchan's Neer Ka Nirman, which stands out for its intensity, and Ateet Ka Chal Chitra by poet, freedom fighter and activist Mahadevi Verma, which are sketches from the memories of her past. Nirad C. Chaudhary's Autobiography of an Unknown Indian, published in the year 1951, in which he talks about his anxiety of being in the clutches of two diverse cultures, the British and the Bengali, entailed a lot of controversy. It is also perhaps the best known autobiography in Indian life writing today. His dedication of this book to the memory of the British Empire made him an anti-Indian and pro-British in the eyes of many. Other renowned autobiographies that were published in the 1950s are The Crossroads, an autobiography that came in 1950 by Nripendra Chandra Banerjee, Autobiography, which came in 1959 by N.B. Khare, and Inside Lahore Fort, another book in 1959 by Jayaprakash Narayan. A similar mode of autobiographical writing, memoirs, have also been written, and R.K. Narayan's My Days is probably the most prominent one written by this eminent Indian novelist. A transition is seen to be marked at a point of time from the life histories of the known personalities to the subaltern and the marginalized. The genre of life writing hence gained a great deal of magnitude while trying to understand and study those who are socially marginalized and do not usually raise their voice. In this category, we have both the Dalits and the women writers. In course of time, the Dalit autobiographical narratives have become an integral part of Indian literature as a whole. What we know as the subaltern consciousness, the quest for identity, and the struggle to assert their dignity has become the cornerstone of many such narratives. The Dalit Marathi authors have written their autobiographies, the most remarkable of which are Things I Never Imagined, that came in 1975 by N.S. Suryavanshi, and Baluta by Daya Pawar, which marks a rising in the category of Dalit autobiography. Autobiographies of women mostly deal with their relationships with people in their lives, their identity being based, as we said earlier, on relationships, whereas men seem to mostly record their achievements and work life. This is a very interesting dichotomy that seems to be common, at least in India. And especially as women begin to write and record their very personalized experiences during the 19th century. And we have already spoken about Rasa Sundara Devi in Bengal. Now, what happens then if there is a woman writer who wants to record her own biography, is writing an autobiography or a memoir of sorts, and is also a Dalit? Because now we will have a woman and a Dalit who is in some sense a doubly marginalized group. So you have experiences of Dalit women who are sort of doubly oppressed, kind of a group of society, where first as women and then as Dalits, they are marginalized again and again, and this adds up to an essential fraction of life writing in India. People like Shantabai, Krishnaji, Kamble become the first Dalit women to write an autobiography. The autobiography, say, of Baby Kamble, who is the first Dalit woman to write an autobiography in Marathi, puts forward the plight of the Mahar community, blending in complex issues of caste, class, and gender. Mahadev Desai, for example, published a diary called Mahadevi Bhaini Diary, and it is unique in the realm of Gujarati literature for the reason that instead of the records of his everyday life, he kept the account of Mahatma Gandhi's day-to-day activities. Diary writing in India, like the autobiography, is not really rooted in this country, but originates in the West and begins to be practiced in India around the 19th century. So for people of the West, diary writing is a reflection of a disciplined kind of a life. It records their day-to-day life, their feelings and emotions, their reactions on other people, and so on. But in Indian literature, diary writing becomes a kind of a way that puts forward one's thoughts and feelings practiced by socially aware people to document their activities. A letter, which is regarded as a piece of literary work, must have informative value as well as aesthetic appeal. So the qualities of a good letter rests on its probing of a subject, thought, feeling, and understanding. This prose form was found extremely promising by many Indian writers. To trace the history of the form of the letter, or the epistolatory form as it is often referred to, the letters of Ghalib should be mentioned, that make him famous as a prose writer too. Ghalib's letters were published in two different books, Urdu-e-Mualla, that came in 1868, and Ud-e-Hindi, which comes in 1869. It may be observed that every reader of Urdu literature has praised these letters for their beauty, their elegance, naturalness, and intimacy. It marks the beginning in Indian literature of the evolution of epistolatory prose, and it becomes a proper literary form. Ghalib becomes the pioneer of this particular form. The eminent Indian letter writers like Swami Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, Sarojini Naidu, Toru Dutt, and even last but not the least, Jawaharlal Nehru have many letters to their credit. The letters highlight a great deal of the happenings in their lives, both in personal and at the public level. In case of Toru Dutt, her letters exhibit a sense of nostalgia for being away from her motherland, while Sarojini Naidu's letters project her as a woman who always had to maintain a balance between her personal and public life. Now, journals always have a specific purpose to serve, either written for keeping personal record or documenting events and as a form of life writing. Also, journals have a particular kind of significance. For instance, during India's freedom struggle, the journals play a very, very important and a crucial role. Mahatma Gandhi edited journals like Young India, Harijan, or Navjeevan, and they were means to reach out to people with his thoughts and ideas. This genre at this particular point of time has to be understood as being extremely political in nature. Speeches which are directly addressed to people have a huge impact in their mind, as words again have a powerful, influential capacity. The performative element of speech making must also always be kept in mind when we think of speeches as a literary genre. The speeches delivered by the luminaries of India like Swami Vivekananda or Mahatma Gandhi or Nehru or Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, or even as late as APJ Abdul Kalam, are very inspirational. Many of these speeches have been transcribed for posterity, and well-known speeches rendered by Jawaharlal Nehru on the eve of India's independence after the long-drawn struggle against the British Empire is considered to be one of the greatest speeches of all times. In this module, we have been talking about life writing in its various forms. Life writing, it must be understood, does not include merely the biography or the autobiography. In this particular section, we have talked about autobiographies, biographies, memoirs, letters, personal or public letters in that section. We have also looked at speech making. We have looked at other specific kinds of genres such as personal diaries as well. So all of these very varied kinds of instruments or vehicles, as we might refer to them, carry the onus of understanding, of inscribing, and of dispersing ideas about selfhood and self-expression in terms of what is largely nowadays referred to as the genre of life writing. Now, life writing, we must recollect, and I'm going to repeat some of the things that I have already mentioned as we begin this section, just for recapitulation. Life writing has been established as a powerful means for its ability to enhance the growth and development of a person, which is applicable across regions or cultures. And like elsewhere in the world, in India too, it is a complex and a very hybrid kind of a phenomenon, and it is not really possible to define it in terms of particular matter or method. We have a country that has a great diversity, and many of the writers who do this kind of life writing actually derive their creative materials from this variety, this diversity itself. Travel writings, interviews, personal essays, all of these constitute the other forms of life writing. The recent developments in global technology, of which India is really an absolutely integral part, is also a fast developing area in terms of the kind of inscriptions or writing that is happening in the genre, which again may be included within the larger spectrum of life writing. In the present time, people tend to use the internet to send emails and write blogs, and much of this could also be read in terms of this large genre that we have been talking about in this module in terms of life writing. Thank you.